Sonic Robo Blast 2 is a very important game to me. I spent countless hours as a teenager in this community, playing this game, learning how to mod it. It's probably fair to say that my passion for game development in part traces back to this game. When I hit a rut in my personal projects a couple years ago, I came back to this community and found it somehow even more thriving than it was when I left it. Making games and modding them is fun. Sunset over Chaos is a lot of different things. It's an opportunity for me to get a whole bunch of boss ideas I'd been sitting on out of my system. It was an opportunity to play with the updated SOC system, so much more powerful and user-friendly than it ever was when I was a kid, and yet rendered completely obsolete by the addition of Lua. It's also weirdly personal. This opening cutscene you're watching is kind of an edgy, dramatized riff on some old community drama. Shine talked about more or less these same events in his History of SMS video. The short version is that SRB2 version 2.0 made some changes to modding that I strongly disagreed with. Sonic Overdrive here in the background was one of many mods affected by it. It's something that's kind of bugged me in the back of my mind for a long time. When the idea of bringing Overdrive back as a boss battle occurred to me, I thought a bit about what kinds of things he might have to say to the player. And that kind of turned into the entire narrative story mode of Sunset over Chaos. So let's dive right in. Shoutouts to Inazuma, who used the cutscene version of the mod, saw this joke, and immediately skipped every other cutscene. It's entirely fair, to be honest. So the first boss is Mecha Cherno, based on a Toho character. Toho's fun because the games are all about trying to express different imagery through bullet patterns, so as a result every Toho character has a really strong aesthetic that it's super fun to put into different contexts. Cherno has already had a couple cameos in Sonic Robo Blast, and I think she's Mystic's favorite Toho character. And since I wanted to do a Toho boss in general, that kind of just made her the obvious choice. The stupid magic trick where the text changes immediately was actually kinda tricky to get to work. There's a screenshot of her saying, "I am the Sunset Fae," that it immediately cuts to, since there's a maximum text speed that SOC cutscenes can go. Cherno here is kind of freezing over a green flower zone in a way that's very reminiscent of Final Demo's Christmas mode, using the same textures. It's not the most tenuous Final Demo reference in the mod pack, but it is a bit silly. You must be an absolute baka. So Cherno actually has more attacks than most bosses in the pack. She was the last one I coded, despite being the first boss. All of them are based on moves she's had in Toho game. This attack with the bullets stopping in the air is based on Perfect Freeze from Scarlet Devil. The Icicle lobbing thing there is one of two Icicle Fall inspired moves. And the giant snowballs, yeah, they're snowballs, not beach balls, are from Hysanto? I have no idea how it's pronounced. The fighting game. She was honestly a little overtuned on the original release, considering she's 1, Cherno, and 2, the first boss. So I did eventually go back and make it so that she barely has any invincibility frames, and you can just kind of wail on her if you know what you're doing. I'm actually very bad at my own mod, though, so I'm taking multiple hits to Cherno. This Desperation move is also based on Icicle Fall, and it has the iconic safe spot right in Cherno's face. It's also a bit too loud when you do that, though, hence the editing magic there. And Cherno explodes into penguins when you beat her, just because that's kind of the only ice-themed flickies. So, SRB2 2.1 completely changed Techno Hill Zone's core gimmick. And this is especially memorable to me because when you've played THZ1 in Final Demo a billion times, you're gonna go through the entire level without ever touching the goop. So when the goop was changed from an obstacle to something that you have to fall in to progress at a couple points, it can be very confusing as a player. My first time playing 2.1 Techno Hill Zone, I got completely stuck because I didn't realize it was okay to jump in the goo. And I think it's definitely a better gimmick for the map, but you can still feel remnants in Techno Hill 1 of when it was just a pain pit you fell into. Cairo here is honestly making some much more nonsensical arguments about game design. He's kind of making this common mistake a lot of amateur game designers make, where he assumes that making the game easier makes it worse. But he's also just kind of big dumb boomer frog. Cairo is probably my least favorite boss in the pack. I think he needs like one more move, one more weird trick he can pull to really be fleshed out and interesting. Prior to coming up with the whole Metal Beasts aesthetic, Cairo was originally going to be a remake of the Egg Slimer. That boss has been more or less completely unchanged since Final Demo, so I think it kinda needs it. Of course, one of the attacks meant for that idea got moved to the Ultimate Eggmobile later, so I think that's part of why Cairo feels a little bare bones. The little goop splash attack here was one of the first things I thought about making when I first learned about the custom value options in Modern Sock. The bubble attack uses some like super weird MF flame shenanigans to only spawn underwater. So if getting past it is too difficult, you can kind of herd him onto the land areas to get him to stop using it. In practice, though, that's not a thing at all. You either just dodge it or damage boost through it. Cairo explodes into fish because there are no frog flickies for some reason. It honestly doesn't fit at all. Deep Sea Zone didn't exist in any form in Final Demo, so there's not much to say about the map itself. I kinda threw in this line about turning it murky gray like the old Doom palette, but at this point you can definitely see where the references are starting to stretch a bit. Sunset Vermin were based on a suggestion from my partner, who does not play Sonic Robo Blast. And since he has kind of an affinity for rats, I decided to make them rats in his honor. Of course, the real Final Demo reference here is the concept of enemy spam. Modern SRB2 has a lot of very impactful enemies, especially when they're placed well. But back in the day we had crawlers and jetties, and occasionally skims and crawler commanders if you feel like being fancy. So the way you made enemies matter to the player was just to place a shit ton of them. Final Demo Castle Eggman was probably the worst offender here, but it was all over the place in level design back there, just a million crawlers. So the suggestion that inspired this boss was to base something on the Mario Sunshine Manta Ray battle, where the battle isn't so much about not getting killed by the boss as it's trying to catch the damn thing. So the white rat, the one you have to hit, will do a lot of dodging and juking to try and get away from you. Once it's taken a few hits, it will even start, like, turning invulnerable to phase through crowds of other rats and come out the other side. My instincts were telling me that it wasn't a good idea, but it honestly came out a lot more fun than I thought. Just making the rats randomly jump at you somehow made them like 10 times more threatening than crawlers. By the way, that hissing noise it uses to summon its allies is me recorded in Audacity with a few filters thrown on top. I'm told that's how all the cool people make their sound effects. This animation of the rats exploding probably takes a bit longer than I'd like, but it's kind of funny to watch the metal rat swarm turn into a smaller, non-metal rat swarm. Balancing this boss for no-spin characters was a nightmare. I tried all sorts of things, up to including hiding some Armageddon shields that only Amy and Fang could get at. In the end, the best solution I could come up with was using some dumb sock magic to essentially give Fang an extra ability in this map. If a rat sees a nearby cork during its death animation, it will shoot another cork at one of its friends. So you kind of get this effect where Fang seems like he's ricocheting his shots off a bunch of rats at once. In the end, it definitely makes the fight too easy, but better than making it impossible, I think. So, of all the maps in Sonic Robo Blast, the biggest, most dramatic changes were made to Castle Eggman Zone, which was completely redesigned and completely reimagined. Level design guides of the final demo era would have to have a little aside that said, "Don't imitate Castle Eggman's level design, it's not good." It had cramped corridors, it was a button hunt, there was super poor directioning, it was just not a good level. And like, I couldn't imagine anything from it that Sunset Thunderbird here would want to restore in the new version. So I just kind of made that the joke. She's completely and entirely unreasonable. Oh, the fact that the old level was non-linear meant that it was harder to brute force? What? At this point when I was writing these, it was 2 or 3 a.m., so I'm sure a lot of these jokes sounded a lot funnier in my head. I also use the word impregnable twice in short succession in this cutscene. Very good writing. The backgrounds for these cutscenes were kind of made last minute. They're all either just vanilla skyboxes or minor edits to vanilla skyboxes. It would probably be possible to make like a proper cutscene using SOC, but good gods, I don't even want to think about how long it would take. She was supposed to blow you to the ends of the earth with her wind, but it didn't fit in the screen, so this cutscene's already way too long. So fun fact, this is another boss made in part of recycled parts. That airman attack was made for the CSCS Panic collaboration, which, at the time, I thought was dead. Since I'd spent the better part of an afternoon figuring out how to make SOC projectiles move like that, I really didn't want it to go to waste, so literally this boss is a Thunderbird because that was an enemy I could think of that could use that attack. While I'm satisfied with this boss's individual attacks, I'm still not super happy with the exact way they're all put together. It will randomly choose between the airman attack and the dive, but it will never dive more than twice in a row. Further, the amount of time it waits in between attacks goes down as its health drops. But none of that is, like, clear at all. I designed the airman attack so that you could kind of weave through it, like in the original Mega Man 2 boss, but no one ever does that. And that's why I'm not very good at it either. It feels really good when you do pull it off, though, at least. This Lightning Storm attack was originally created for a version of Sunset Ryu. In practice, it's not really very threatening since there's no reason to stay inside of the radius. I think one thing this boss really needs is for more characters to be able to hit it while it's flying circles around you. Its iframes end as soon as it gets up in the sky, specifically to enable characters like Fang to be able to do it, but in general I think fight would feel nicer if everyone could do it. Probably something as simple as adding more ramps or stairs to the castle ruins around would be enough to do it. The Thunderbird explodes into bluebirds because it is itself a blue bird. This is the stupidest fucking cutscene in the game. It's the last comedic cutscene in the game, and also it's 3 AM, so I just kind of crammed as many stupid jokes as I could think of into it. This art literally just comes from the vanilla intro. You can literally see Sonic in the bottom right corner. Eggman recognizes you as being the one who created the metal beasts, which is kind of meant to be a subtle hint about the identity of the villain as Sonic Overdrive. The original final demo, Overdrive, literally just used the default SSN Sonic sprites instead of having any kind of unique visuals. Which of course doesn't work at all if you're playing as a character other than Sonic. I could just write the cutscene around that fact and continue to leave the player character ambiguous, or I could write the best damn joke in the mod. A subtle difference with this boss compared to the Metal Beasts is that it's closer to a vanilla boss. It uses the vanilla boss music instead of the Mystic Realm boss music. I think a modular weapons platform is actually a pretty accurate description of the Eggmobile. If you compare the different versions of the Green Flower 3 fight, they're all similar, but the basic attacks Eggman uses have changed a lot over the years. So this fight is kind of a commentary on that. It's also a commentary on a lot of Final Demo era custom bosses, which would use the same basic AI as the Eggmobile, but would change what attack he was using slightly. Like there's the Eggman Way one shooting Doom missiles, there's the Mystic Realm one that has like orbital crystals shooting at you. That combined with the fact that if you're releasing a map pack, even in the modern version of the game, and you don't have the knowledge on how to code a custom boss, you're just gonna slap a vanilla boss in there. As a result, I think anyone who's been in this community for any length of time has killed a version of the Eggmobile about 8,000 times. So the big joke of this fight, which I was actually very relieved to see how many people got, is just that it's that, but rapid fire. He changes attacks every 2 hits. Originally I was going to do an attack for every hit, but I just couldn't come up with enough. And there's kind of an extra rule that they all have to be just a relatively basic loop of relatively simple sock actions. I tried to stick to vanilla projectiles too, but a couple of them did have quirks I had to modify a bit. This is the extra attack I was going to give the Egg Slimer remake, by the way, if that isn't obvious. I had to make a slightly custom version of the slime ball projectile, otherwise it wouldn't actually shoot with any speed. This last attack is great. It's a reference to the 2.0 or 2.1 version of the Eggmobile, which had an attack that was itself a reference to the final demo Castle Eggman version of the Eggmobile. And more like a vanilla boss than a metal beast, we end on a traditional Eggman capsule. So, there's no way to talk about Final Demo Red Volcano Zone without being at least a little edgy. Red Volcano was hidden in the game as an Easter egg in which a character would tell you to go to hell, and then you die and respawn at Red Volcano. That version of Red Volcano didn't really have any enemies in it, nor did it have any of the nice green outdoor sections of the modern version of the level. So if we've established that the Metal Beasts are trying to restore the game how it was in the final demo era, what does turning Red Volcano back to its original form look like? This is also based a bit on some of the early reactions I got to beta versions of Sunset Ryu, where it's sort of came out a lot more intimidating than I expected. So I just kind of leaned into that a bit with the writing. This music is just from the Metal Sonic fight, but for whatever reason it works super well for just a giant enraged monster. Took all my power to not call this level the Red Hell Zone. Sunset Ryu is largely based on some old conversations I had with Flame way back in 2.0 about the feasibility of making a chase boss. It wasn't really doable back then, but the addition of a check range to the game is literally all it takes to make the kind of crappy sock-based waypoint system work. He scales his speed a bit based on how often the player spends time close to him too. But like anything sock-powered, there's all kinds of stupid stuff going on under the hood. The waypoints are actually slowly bouncing up and down, which is how he gets the sort of wavy motion pattern he does. This was actually the first boss I made in this pack, and it wasn't originally made for this pack. It was actually originally designed for Sacred Abyss Zone. The original idea was that it would be kind of bluish, shoot blue fire and lightning, and have Eggman riding on the front of it. That lightning attack is the Sunset Thunderbirds now, but this boss is still called the Egg Ryu in the game code. I was pleasantly surprised in testing that players were immediately able to figure out that the head was the weak point. The tail segments actually don't have a hitbox at all, because otherwise it would get stuck on itself. I'm not sure if anyone's noticed yet. So, full confession here. Overdrive's speech at the end here is a little real. Have you enjoyed making everything I created look like garbage is such an unsubtle double meaning. I don't think I'm fooling anyone. The reason why Sunset Over Chaos is made with sock is because sock used to be my thing. And I like to think I still have a pretty thorough understanding of it, but sock doesn't matter at all in the current version of the game. Overdrive is the final boss here because he's the one of my mods that people kind of remember sometimes. He's my little piece of SRB2 history. And the decision to make Overdrive the final boss was what kind of brought the whole boss pack idea together in the end. By the way, this map is a city because it was originally supposed to be Greenflower City specifically. I had a much edgier concept for this fight early on that involved him trying to, well, restore what happened to Greenflower City in final demo. The ring dropping concept is what really made me want to do this fight. It's such a goofy, intuitive way to do boss health, and like, even in all the rival battles in official Sonic games, I don't think they've ever gone that far. It was also a fun technical challenge to make in Sock. He tracks his ring count using the custom value memory slot. Separately, he has 999 actual health, since you're never really supposed to kill him that way, which is also why he glitches out life bar mods. The giant laser is kind of Overdrive's signature thing, in my opinion. I couldn't bring myself to bring him back for version 2.0 because there was no way to make it anymore. This move is my favorite just because when you're playing as Sonic, it's almost like a Western showdown, but with talking. Not everyone actually figures out that you need to stand still, though. The cool thing about the ring health system is that it means you're effectively healing every time you get a good hit in. That means that even though the boss has a lot of very difficult to dodge attacks, you're still very likely to get through the fight on your first or second attempt. It has a neat way of making the fight feel exciting and high stakes without making it too difficult. I think that's a fine thing for a final boss to be, especially for a franchise like Sonic. Though there is a great video on YouTube of a server full of players trying to beat him with no rings. The great thing about this spin attack is that I created it specifically with the idea that a playable Overdrive could have this kind of move, and then I made a playable Overdrive and couldn't fit that move in. By the way, the extra rings that he forgets to pick up are just kind of a weird consequence of exactly how I've coded him to pick them up. The rings he drops are not MT rings or MT fling rings, they're a custom object, but they turn into MT rings when you touch them. And so if you only touch them for one tick, they'll turn back into a normal ring, but you won't immediately pick them up. But Overdrive won't care about them because he's only collecting his weird fake rings. He also loses 3 rings to the void without dropping them every attack cycle. If he didn't do that, then the last, like, 20 rings would take, like, 15 hits, just with how spread out they get. So since I decided against the plan of having Overdrive try to nuke Greenflower City for his desperation attack, I instead kinda based it on Ringslinger. He's specifically shooting final demo weapon rings at you, including the old homing ring. And there's this kind of really subtle thing where he can do this despite being out of rings, because that used to be one of his abilities in final demo, to shoot red rings without spending them. Again, it's not hard to dodge at all, you just run in a circle, but it's flashy and exciting. This ending cutscene is so cheesy. More incredibly subtle, double-meaning dialogue there. There's a kind of bittersweetness to seeing the whole SRB2 community grow up like it has. For all I've spent this entire mod talking about ways the game has changed, I think the community is an unambiguously better place than it used to be. This game is important to me. I think it always will be. It's a bit of a bittersweet feeling seeing it change, but I mean, just look at how it's thriving. Oh my god, this cutscene really is just too cheesy though, I'm sorry. By the way, there's another overpowered Sonic recolor from the final demo era. And how could I not include a stupid Easter egg with him? Thanks for watching.